stopped by our house with other friends, and he was at
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 2nd, 2019 City Council work session. I would ask that everybody has electronic devices that make noise to please silence them. We have a full agenda today, so we'll get going right away. Ms. Pollock, would you come up and introduce our first team?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are very pleased to have had Salisbury University's senior sustainability class do a project this year that benefits the city of Salisbury. So they came and met with us very early in the semester, and we talked about what we're doing and what our sustainability goals are. And they selected this project from a discussion that they had with Alyssa and I, and we have been looking into becoming a tree city, and they have done a deep dive into what it would take for us to become a tree city. So this is their presentation. They're going to talk through all the steps and what would be necessary. They'll get into this in more detail, but they've provided us with draft ordinances, so we will continue to work with field operations and with the legal department to go through these ordinances in great detail. So we'll be back to you in the spring with some more detailed information, but right now they're going to give you the big overview of what it would take to become a tree city. So we are thrilled with the amount of work that they've been able to accomplish this semester. And so I will turn it over to Dr. Surak's class.
We're going to be up here, if that's okay. Does that work?
Yep, it works. Just if you pull the mic down a little bit towards you.
Like here?
There you go.
Okay.
You're good.
Good afternoon, City Council members, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Sophia Carrasco.
And I'm Rachel Dobbs.
And we are here along with members of our class. We are students from Salisbury University's Environmental Studies Department, and we are currently completing our senior seminar capstone project. For the past several weeks, we have been working with the Director of Infrastructure and Development, Amanda Platt, and the Sustainability Coordinator, Alyssa Macy Hastings, to help reach our project goals. Our project proposes a Tree City certification for the City of Salisbury. Tonight, we are presenting an overview to provide you with all the information about why Salisbury should be a tree city and the steps to take in order to put the certification in place.
Tree City USA is a nationwide movement that looks to provide the framework necessary for communities to manage and expand their public trees. More than 3,400 cities participate across the country, which includes nearby cities like Ocean City, Easton, Chestertown, and Annapolis. Salisbury University is also certified as a tree campus. Implementing a Tree City certification would allow for several environmental and societal benefits, such as reduced energy consumption, a stronger sense of community pride, and can help with stormwater management and erosion. This certification also aligns with several of Salisbury's pre-existing sustainability initiatives, such as Salisbury's commitment to alternative forms of transportation, like our bike lanes, creating a sustainability coordinator position, a green business certification, implementing a stormwater fee, and establishing the zero waste efforts at the National Folk Festival. This certification will also bring positive publicity to the city of Salisbury. Before we explain the requirements needed to achieve the certification, we want to emphasize that this certification does not require the city to plant any trees or spend any additional money.
The certification requires the meeting of 4 different standards. We have spent this semester outlining and coordinating a plan for the city to enact to meet the certification requirements. The first standard is the establishment of a tree board. We are happy to report that the Green Team Committee is in support of this certification and has expressed interest in forming the subcommittee to establish the necessary tree board. The main responsibilities of the tree board is to oversee tree maintenance on public land and to plan an Arbor Day celebration. Tree City certification also requires the city to spend at least $2 per capita on tree maintenance. We have concluded that these funds are already allocated within the Parks and Recreation budget, which means there are no budgetary needs for this certification. In addition, we have also been working with the Salisbury Zoo to coordinate the first Arbor Day celebration, which is also a requirement. National Arbor Day falls on Friday, April 24th, and is in the same week as Earth Day, April 22nd. The zoo already puts on events for Earth Week, and we thought working with the zoo to create and celebrate these events together would be a great way to complete this standard and make the public aware of Salisbury's efforts.
Lastly, in order to complete the certification, the city must pass a tree ordinance. This ordinance will support and encourage the beautification and value enhancement for trees. It will also detail how to avoid harmful insects, diseases, and unnecessary costs and liability. Through our research, we have discovered that the city of Salisbury does not yet have any ordinance related to trees. Therefore, we have drafted an ordinance and resolution and submitted it to the Green Team to edit and then send to the city's attorney's office. The ordinance will require approval from the City Council and Mayor Day. Finally, the city will need to apply to become a certified participant in Tree City USA. This step can be taken once the tree board is established and all 4 standards are complete. We believe the city can complete the certification process in 2020.
On behalf of my colleagues in our senior seminar class, we appreciate having the time to present our capstone project to the City Council. We hope that the city will consider applying for this certification to become a Tree City USA. We are happy to now answer any questions you have for our class. Thank you.
Very well done. Questions?
Well, the answer to one that I had when I initially read through it, which was, can we just do a subcommittee in the existing green team instead of creating another board? So,
And I will mention they've gone as far as to contact an arborist that would be willing to serve on that subcommittee, which is wonderful, because it would be great for us to have that expertise on the committee.
Right.
That's fantastic.
How many hours did you spend on this project? Did you keep track?
All semester, sir.
Okay. Great idea. Well, you know, we have a tradition of being Bee City, Bike City. Tree City seems the next logical step, which I think is fantastic. Very, very timely too, I would say. So, Alyssa, you're ready to lead the charge, I guess? The next steps, you're going to present to us the subcommittee?
Yes, so we're working with Green Team right now. We'll review the ordinance in great detail. A lot of it ties in with field operations, so we're going to go through some of that information with them. Would like to meet with the arborist and make sure that they're comfortable with some of the language. As I had mentioned, that there's that we have to have the $2 per capita annual budget, so that primarily comes out of field ops budget. So they've actually set up a worksheet for us to be able to track how much of their budget applies to trees. So Alyssa and I will be sitting down with field ops and trying to populate that spreadsheet, and salaries are included. So we don't feel like it'll be any problem to get to $2 per capita. It's just a matter of pulling all that out of the budget. So those are our next steps. And as they mentioned, we have to have completed all 4 standards before we can apply to be a Tree City. So really, we'll be targeting the application for right after the Arbor Day celebration in April, because by then we should have been able to accomplish, hopefully, all the other things. So we'll be back early next year with the ordinance.
Great. Who helped you with the ordinance, the development of the ordinance?
So for that standard, we actually found sample ordinances from other cities. There are multiple, I think there's between 18 and 20 things that you need to cover within the ordinance. So we found sample ones from different cities and kind of mirrored those, and then we put them in the format of the ordinances, how you guys format them, so it was easy and applicable for you guys.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Michelle, any questions?
No, that was
Mr. Mayor?
timetable was going to be my only
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, Mr. President, just a couple things. I want to thank Dr. Serac for making her class available. I want to thank the students for their hard work, and highlight that this is another benefit to having a university in our city, and partnering with them, or a university right up against our city. want us to think about a couple things, just as things for you to anticipate as the ordinance and as legislation comes to you. Let's not only look at the fact that we can get by on the money that we do have budgeted, but that we maybe should be doing more, particularly when it comes to investment in street trees. One of the best ways that cities can achieve multiple objectives, including environmental, including cleaning the air, but also slowing traffic and adding value to our neighborhoods. And then also want us to consider how we work with utility companies. We've got a relationship with them, but one of the things that's enshrined in state law is that they can cut trees to shape around
Yes.
utility lines, and that's obviously something we want to get away from, that sort of hacking at trees. And the way that other municipalities have engaged in that is by adopting legislation that requires a review of the health of the tree in order to then shape the tree around the utility lines. And we can be proactive. We don't have to end up in a decision, but we can be proactive and create legislation that says we want the trees to be, a little offset so that they're not growing into power lines. We could also encourage more burial of utilities, although that obviously comes with an expense and might set up future confrontations with said utility companies. But we appreciate the partnership that we've got from them in exploring solutions. And I just want to say thank you again to the students.
Yeah, thank you, and definitely for I always found that projects like that in school tend to give you a much broader understanding of what's going on, and you're to be commended for that, and I thank you very much, and Dr. Surak as well.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
You want to get a group picture? Council want a picture with the students?
Yeah.
Should we put people in the front? Yeah.
Shorter people in the front.
I like the front.
Melissa, you're not sure.
I'm not doing this.
It's okay if I
That's actually great. Ready? Stand up. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, you're all doing it. Are you all?
Yeah, we all good. Okay.
Thanks for coming.
see you too. Thank you all.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice job. Thank you. Of course. Good to see you.
While we're recognizing the students, we have another class here, don't we? I recognize some people in the back of the room. Anybody that's in Ms. Gland's class, please stand up and be recognized. Welcome. This is part of their assignment, correct?
It is.
It is.
What a meeting, too.
You picked a good meeting because we're going to be here till midnight, so you're going to earn your keep. No, we really won't be here till midnight. Maybe. Okay. Next up, we have the presentation of the FY19 audit. And our finance director, Mr. Cordery, is going to come up and lead us through this, or point to the auditors.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good.
Uh-oh. he brought
Is
a
that
box.
just a prop that every
brought a
auditor
box.
has with
Wait
them?
a minute. We never went into that much depth before.
here now.
Maybe we will be here till midnight.
Ruh-roh.
The floor is yours.
You help me out.
Getting the handouts passed out here. And then we'll turn it right over to PKS. Yeah, one for the clerk. Yeah, thank you.
you. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Leslie Michaelick. I'm an audit manager with PKS, and I supervise the audit work. And this is Andy Haney, who's a partner responsible for a lot of our government audits. So we performed an audit of the financial statements of the city for the year ended June 30th, 2019. The main objective of an audit is to express an opinion on those financial statements as to whether they're a fair presentation of the city's financial position. In the audit opinion, it says that the financial statements are the representation of the management of the city, that the auditor's responsibility is to express an opinion based upon our audit procedures. Our opinion is that the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the city of Salisbury as of June 30th, 2019, and for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America, or GAAP. This is a clean or an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can give on the financial statements. We also perform our audit in accordance with government auditing standards, or sometimes referred to as the Yellow Book. And the Yellow Book requires us to look at two additional things. We look at whether or not the city has complied with all applicable laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. And we don't express an opinion on that, but we are required to report any instances of noncompliance that we find. And the good news is we did not find any noncompliance, so therefore had nothing to report there. We also, the second part of that is we look at the city's accounting policies and procedures. Again, we don't express an opinion on those, but any weaknesses that we see in the city's procedures we're required to report. Again, we have good news is that we did not find any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the city's accounting procedures. So I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of the financial statements. You've each received a bound copy of the audited financial statements and a copy of the single audit report, which we'll talk about later. But I'm going to refer to these handouts as we go through. You can mull on all the details later. So kind of an overview of the financial statements. There's actually two sets of financial statements. There's the government-wide financial statements and the fund financial statements. And they're both different, but they're equally important. The government-wide financial statements are comprehensive. They include all the activities of the city, and they include all the assets and liabilities. So they include all the long-term assets and liabilities. So they include the capital assets, they include long-term debt, they include the net pension obligation. They're reported on the accrual basis of accounting, which is the same basis of accounting that a for-profit organization uses. And they're important because it helps the city to look at all the long-term financial position of the city. The fund statements break out the different parts of the city and report them as funds. There are several different kinds of funds. The governmental funds, the largest of which is your general fund, it looks at a narrower focus. It looks at a short-term focus and concentrates on financing resources coming in and going out. It recognizes transactions that only affect cash flow in the near term or the short term. This statement is important because this is what you use to manage your annual budget. Most of your decisions are made on those resources coming in and out. There's also the enterprise fund, or a business type fund. The biggest of that is your water and sewer fund. And so they're for funds that are operated like a business, where the fees are set at a certain level with the goal of covering all your expenses. The enterprise fund, again, provides short-term and long-term information, and it uses the accrual basis the same as the government-wide. Also in the financial statements are notes, some required supplemental information, other supplemental information, and statistical information to give you a lot more detail about everything. So we're going to start with the general fund. For the year ended June 30th, 2019, the general fund had revenues of $40,425,000, expenditures of $38,534,000, other uses of finances of $440,000 for an increase in your general fund balance of $1,451,000. This is a significant change from the prior year where you had a decrease in your general fund balance of $1.7 million. And it's also a favorable variance from your amended budget. Your budget had a decrease of $3.4 million, which is a almost $4.8 million difference from the actual, what actually happened. The general fund revenues by source, your largest source of revenue in the general fund is property and other taxes of $28 million, which make up 70% of your general fund revenues. Comparing revenues this year and last year, total revenues increased by $2.7 million or 7%. And again, compared to budget, there was a favorable variance of $1.6 million, where your actual revenues exceeded your anticipated revenues. Do you want to? General fund expenditures by program. Your largest area of expenditures in the general fund is public safety, which is the police department, the fire department, $22,593,000 or 59%. Followed by public works, which makes up about 12% of your total expenditures, and general government and debt service are each about 10% of your expenditures. Compared to last year, expenditures decreased $608,000 or 1.5%. And also compared to your budget, you had a favorable variance of $3.9 million. So your actual expenditures were less than your budgeted expenditures. So the general fund balance, which is the difference between your assets and liabilities and represents that cushion or that buffer, which is your ability to meet future contingencies. At the end of the year, the fund balance was $12,930,000, and that's broken down into different categories, which indicates the spendability of that money. Of the total, $794,000 is reported as non-spendable, which it represents inventory in the public works and in the police department. You could also have a category called restricted, which is restricted by external, either the granting agency or the state, and you did not have any of that in the general fund. The committed general fund and the assigned general fund balances have internal restrictions or earmarks on them. And then you have your unassigned balance. Your total unrestricted, which are the three categories, committed, assigned, and unassigned, totaled $12,136,000, and that represents about 3 3/4 months of operating expenses. The total unrestricted fund balance of $9.8 million actually increased over the prior year by a little over $2 million or 29%. And I believe, Keith, did you have some things you wanted to add there?
Well, at some point I was going to do a deep dive into the general fund. Everybody's focused on the general fund, and we actually had revenues over expenditures of $1.45 million, which is a significant amount. So I wanted to give you some explanation on how that happened. So there's only 4 significant items I wanted to share with you. Favorable expenditures, we had debt service that had $700,000 in savings because we consolidated our issuance for 19 into 20.
That was 700,000?
About 700, yep. We had a credit from the Maryland retirement system of $250,000 that has to do with an agreement that was made in our LEOPS program in 2003 when we transferred the program into LEOPS. We had local income taxes, $398,000 more than what was budgeted, so it was quite a surprise. Building permits up $285,000 over what was budgeted. So those 2 items of unanticipated revenue of local income taxes and building permits and the savings and the debt service and the credit from the Maryland retirement system resulted in a big influence on creating that $1.45 million. We also realized a $740,000 increase to surplus due to prior year credits that had accumulated, so due to the Maryland retirement program that I just discussed. So you add the 740 plus the 1.5, there's a total increase to unassigned surplus, which we often talk about, making it grow from 7.4 million to 9.8 million, or an increase of 2.4 million. So as stated, this takes us very close to our 3 months of expenditures, which we've been targeting as a minimum for a very long time. So it's fantastic news.
It's the first time we've hit it in
A while.
3 years.
That's right, yeah. So we'll revisit this in more detail when we do the financial health presentation, when we do the budget, but I did want to share some insight on that
I
1.45
appreciate
million.
that.
Yeah. Turn it back over to Leslie.
Okay. The next graph actually shows your general fund balance for the 5 years, very colorful graph there. So the total fund balance has remained pretty steady at about 12 million over the 5 years, had a little dip in 2018 and then back up to that level in 2019. The pink in the middle represents the unassigned fund balance, which we've said a couple times now, actually increased over the past 3 years from 6.6 million at June 30th, 2017, up to the 9.8 million at June 30th, 2019. Okay, I'm going to move on to the Water and Sewer Fund. So the Water and Sewer Fund, as I said, reports revenues and expenses similar to a for-profit business, and includes capital assets, long-term debt, and net unfunded pension obligations. And instead of measuring fund balance, it measures net position. So for the year ended June 30th, 2019, the Water and Sewer Fund had operating income of $832,566. This includes depreciation expense of $4.5 million. Depreciation expense is a non-cash expense that represents the declining value of your assets. After some non-operating revenues, the Water and Sewer Fund had an increase in net position of $898,233. If you're comparing 2019 and 2018, you'll see significant differences in depreciation expense
That's the water treatment plant.
grants. Yes, that's because the wastewater treatment plant was placed in service, and we began depreciating that in 2019. And of course, there was the grant funds were used up.
I
there,
asked
so
this
that's
before. Full depreciation, we're not in accelerated depreciation.
No, it's straight
No,
line.
Straight line.
Yeah.
Okay.
Net position in the Water and Sewer Fund was a total of $75,083,000. Of this amount, $56 million is invested in your property, plant, and equipment, net of any outstanding debt. You had restricted net position of almost $18 million, leaving an unrestricted net position of $894,000. Not all of the net position is spendable, so for an enterprise fund or a business type fund, we look at working capital, which measures your ability to meet your obligations. Working capital is your current assets less your current liabilities. So the Water and Sewer Fund had $4.3 million of working capital at the end, and that's about 95 days of working capital, which is pretty good. The Government Finance Officers Association recommends a target of about 45 days, so you're a good bit above that. And so now I'm going to move on to the government-wide statements. As I said, the government-wide statements encompass all of the city's activities, and they're separated into governmental activities and business-type activities. Governmental activities during the year had a decrease in net position of $277,000. The business-type activities had an increase in net position of $753,000, for a total increase in net position of $476,000. Net position at the end of the year in total was almost 85 million. 90 million of that is invested in capital assets, 24 million was restricted, and there's a deficit of 29,373,000. The reason there's such a large deficit there is because of the net pension obligations. So if you flip to the next page.
Okay. I'm glad, it would have come up if Mr. Ireton was still on the council. but-
So the pension, the Maryland State Retirement System, the net pension obligation was about 33.5 million at June 30th. Now that represents the difference between the present value of the benefits that your employees have already earned compared to the amount that you've set aside in the trust. It's recorded as a non-current liability. Annually, the city contributes an amount that is calculated by a professional actuary who tells you how much you need to put aside each year. There's large numbers, but it's not really an area, not really a concern for alarm, as long as the city is faithfully making those annual contributions as determined by the actuary. Where you're going to run into trouble is if you don't make those contributions or you elect to make a contribution at a lower amount. This 33 million represents the amount that you need in future years as people retire. Another key factor in evaluating the net pension obligation is to look at the funding ratio. So at June 30th, 19, the pension fund was 71% funded. Now, alone, that number doesn't really mean anything, but you need to look at it as the trend. So you see I have 3 years there, so you can see that that funded ratio is increasing. So that's another good earmark related to that.
Now, this is impacted by the age of our employees, obviously, correct?
It's part of the
Part of the
actuarial calculation.
So they take that into account,
They do.
so that if you had more.
Well, in OPEB, they do. So the pension liability comes right out of the Maryland State Retirement System, and they provide a lot of the actuarial information.
Okay.
The OPEB or other post-employment benefits is similar in that that's the present value of the benefits that have been earned by the employees. So those are the payments that you'll need to make in the future. The difference with the OPEB is there isn't any trust that you're funding. Those benefits are being paid out annually as you go and are part of your annual operating budget.
Expenses.
Capital assets, at June 30, the city's net investment in capital assets was $191,682,000, which represents the original costs spent on the assets reduced each year by the annual depreciation expense. And the city has committed $12 million in the governmental activities and $26 million in business type activities for ongoing projects. The largest of those outstanding commitments are the Main Street Master Plan, the Fitzwater Pump Station, the Palio Well, and Riverside Circle. So those. And then long-term debt. At the end of the year, the city had long-term debt of just under $95 million. There was some new debt of $1.8 million issued during the year for the wastewater treatment plant. The unusual thing, I guess, for this fiscal year is there was no bond. Issue. If we look at the projected debt service costs in the governmental funds, is about $3 million a year and represents about 8% of your operating revenue. In the business type activities, the projected debt service is almost $5 million and represents about 27% of your operating revenue. And I was kind of look at a benchmark of about 30%. You want to keep it less than that 30%, which you are. There is a debt limit for bond indebtedness payable from the general fund revenue. At June 30th, that amount was $53,491,000, which leaves you an available debt margin of $31.7 million. The debt in the business type activities are not subject to a limit. I do want to mention next is a little bit on Mitchell Landing Apartments. We do a separate audit of the Mitchell Landing apartment complex, and I didn't provide you with copies of that, but we did have a clean or unqualified opinion on that. In addition, we're required to audit the apartment's compliance with requirements of the Maryland Department of Health and Community Development. Unfortunately, we did find a non-compliance issue. They're supposed to do an annual income certification for each of the tenants to make sure they qualify for the rent. And we did find 4 out of the tenants that we tested that recertification was not up to date. So we did discuss that with management, and management provided us with a plan, a corrective action plan, to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future. So. Okay.
Do we know if they met the criteria after was it a violation of a potential violation of the dollar amount?
I don't
You don't
believe
know?
that there would be. They were continuing tenants. They weren't any new tenants.
Oh, okay.
So as long as their income remained at a
Okay,
steady level,
that's
they
fine.
were probably okay.
Okay.
The last thing I guess I want to touch on is the single audit report, or the uniform guidance report. And that type of audit is required when the city spends more than $750,000 in federal money, either grants or loans. So for June 30th, the city's federal expenditures totaled $2.8 million. We tested 2 programs as major programs, the Clean Water Revolving Loans, which is for the wastewater treatment plant, and we also looked at the Community Development Block Grants. The city did qualify as a low-risk auditee, which really just determines the amount of expenditures that we're required to look at. If you're a high risk, then we have to look at more. So our report on a single audit report addresses 2 things. We have to look at whether or not the city complied with any compliance requirements related to the federal grants. There's 11 possible compliance requirements. They don't all apply to all the grants, but we have to look to see whether or not the city has complied with the applicable ones, and we do express an opinion on that. So our opinion stated that the city complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements that could have a direct and material effect on each of its major programs for the year ended June 30th, 2019. Again, that's a clean opinion, and we did not identify any non-compliance issues with the federal grants. The second thing we look at is your internal controls over those compliance requirements. We don't express an opinion on that, but we are required to report any weaknesses in those controls, and we did not have any weaknesses to report. So that's all good news. I guess in conclusion, we'd like to say that the books and the records of the city are in good order, that you have strong accounting controls in place. We didn't have any significant problems or difficulties in performing our audit. Keith and Sandy and Olga and the rest of your staff were very cooperative and responsive to all our questions, and that the city is in good financial condition. And we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Well, I think you answered mine during the presentation. I appreciate that. Any questions? Well, I'll say it for the 3rd year in a row that I came from the public sector, and I'm trying to remember if I ever had a clean report.
You came from the private sector.
This is the this is the 3rd, which I think shows from whence we came. Great job, and you can't do better than clean, with no comments. So congratulations to you and your team. Thank you very much.
So it'd be great if I could recognize
I
part of the
wish you
team,
would.
since you
I wish
like
you
to see
would.
their faces. Olga Butar and Sandy Green are in the audience. Maybe we could recognize them. Thank you.
Yeah, and we look forward to another clean audit next year. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Mayor?
applying the pressure.
Well, I just, me, I just,
Well, so can I just add that,
Sure.
this is the 7th fiscal year that I've been in elected office, and we didn't start in this position. And under Mayor Ireton and with the council at the time, we started on a trajectory of responding to, Keith and his team, of responding to all of the issues that were found and I guess had been there for some time, and cleaning them up one by one and listening to the auditors, and fixing those problems and instituting protocols that had to do with our old bond pools. I mean, we had major issues with old bond pools and major issues with grant funds. Just cleaning them up and having better accountability for those dollars. So, it's been a long process, but Keith and Olga and Sandy and the entire team down in finance have just done an incredible job and are impeccable. And I want to add that this is great news. We often hear people say, government should operate like a business, and we know that we have more bottom lines to respond to than the private sector does on operating like a business. But one of the things we ought to do is watch every penny, and clearly that's happening. But on top of that, this is a brand new auditing firm, so we have a new relationship, which I think speaks volumes to the job that Keith has done. This is their first time working with us, and I think this is a good thing. This is a wonderful thing. It's a local business, but regardless of who's doing the auditing, once again, our finance team has done a wonderful job ensuring that the rules are being followed every day and that accurate reporting is happening. So, and in a year when $2.4 million went back to surplus, Mr. President. So we did that just for you.
We'll wait. We're going to wait till the budget presentation, and I can read this. So
we did that just for you.
I appreciate it.
I'm kidding.
The other thing, speaking of budget, we are looking forward to the budget process this year because it's gotten better every year we've done it. Made it a lot easier on us, a lot easier to see and make decisions. So we're hoping that, and thank you, ladies, because I know you do all the hard work, and then you give it to him, and he just waves the magic wand.
Seeks all the glory.
Thank you very much for what you do. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Do you have copies for, okay.
Yeah, thank you. And
Are you gonna run the,
this is,
Michael?
do you want one? Thank you.
If there's an electronic version.
Next up on the agenda is Hudson Health's main campus project, and Michael Sullivan will present. We have some extra mics, so if you want to share the mics, that would be great. Keith, you can just turn that one around. Perfect.
Thank you for having us tonight, Mayor and Council. My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm counsel for Hudson Health Services, Inc. To my right is Ms. Leslie Brown. She's the Chief Executive Officer for Hudson Health. To my left is Kevin Meehan. He is the Chief Officer of Operations and our Clinical Director. And then to my left, further down the table, is the design team hired by Hudson Health Services. I'm sure you know Mr. Ron Morgan and his colleague, Mr. Bill Sight.
Yep.
Well, thank you for having us this evening again, and I want to express my excitement about this opportunity as it relates to the City of Salisbury's largest and most longstanding drug and alcohol rehabilitative center. Founded in 1991, Hudson Health Services, Inc. Founded in 1980, Hudson Health Services, Inc. is a not-for-profit corporation based in Salisbury. Presently, it provides 51 inpatient beds for those suffering from drug and alcohol addiction. And since 2015, in or about that time, Hudson Health identified that its capital facilities were not sufficiently able to meet the needs of its patients. And to that effect, Hudson Health CEO to my right reached out to a regional contractor to improve the facilities located at its main campus, which is just outside the city limits, located on Harding Drive, which is right off of Emerson Avenue. You may not have seen the campus, and that's intentional. It's intended to be private. In fact, federal regulations require that the patient's identities be maintained confidential, not disclosed to anyone, even by subpoena. We were informed by the state that because we are tenants, we would be unable to improve the property without the consent of the state, and likewise, we would be unable to improve the property without compliance of state procurement policies. This was despite the fact that Hudson Health was proposing to fund all of its capital improvements by itself. It was not asking for any public assistance whatsoever. That began a process that brought us here. We reached out to the state and requested in 2017 an extension to Hudson Health's lease agreement. Currently is set to expire on May 18, 2024. The property that Hudson Health leases is located on the same parcel as Deer's Head Hospital. It is not subdivided. Instead, it's effectively described in terms of portions of the property that are used, one for Deer's Head and the other for Hudson Health. When the state was confused as to why lease renewal was being requested so early before the termination of the lease, that generated a number of discussions. But primarily the reason had to do with the fact that Hudson Health was proposing private investment that would be no less than $1 million on its campus, and to allow for that investment to take place without any type of assurance that Hudson Health would be able to continue to use the property. Didn't want to continue on with that investment. So a number of teleconferences were generated from that. Ultimately, in 2017, the state suggested to Hudson Health that it pursue acquisition of its property. And the reason why Hudson Health was amicable to that idea was twofold. First and foremost, it would allow Hudson Health to have complete and total control over its campus property. And secondly, it would provide Hudson Health inherently with the security that it needed to privately finance the infrastructure improvements that it was looking to create. Right now, as I mentioned before, Hudson Health has 51 inpatient beds. It is by far the largest drug and alcohol rehabilitative provider on the Eastern Shore. It is bursting at the seams. It is able to provide a continuum of care that will allow individuals seeking drug and alcohol rehabilitative services to receive inpatient treatment for up to 70 days. Significant. Right now, it's struggling to do that. It has, as you'll see here, it has townhouses that operate as its facilities. Those townhouses are akin to the development that you would see at Oak Hill. They're the same floor plan. They're almost the same exact building design. As Ms. Brown will explain, the facilities that they are proposing to construct would revolutionize the facility, but would also provide very critical and very basic security components. Right now, anyone here can drive up to the campus unabated, be able to inspect those receiving services without requesting permission. In order to do something as simple as construct a security kiosk, Hudson Health must own the property. And so what leads us here tonight is a simple request. We're requesting that the mayor and city council, as the General Assembly is about to reconvene for the 2020 session, submit a letter to not only its Eastern Shore delegation, but also to those individuals that are copied on a letter that was also copied to the mayor's office in August of this past year, specifically requesting that those individuals do whatever is necessary to allow for the property to be disposed to Hudson Health. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
So again, my name is Leslie Brown. I am the president and CEO of Hudson Health Services, and I am going to go through a program that talks a little bit about Hudson Health the history, what we've done recently to address the opioid epidemic, and basically what we are proposing to do on the campus site. So Kevin, I think you're going to have to be moving that for me.
Yes.
So we'll go ahead to the first page. All right, so as Michael said, Mr. Sullivan said, we have been around since 1980. We started off very small, a number of volunteers, men who are suffering from alcoholism, started the program, and we occupied one building of the 4 buildings that now exist on the campus. We are getting ready to celebrate our 40th year celebration next year. Talking about our facilities, we have recently constructed an admissions and administrative buildings in the old Red Cross on Emerson. The purpose to do that is because we needed the space, also because administration and admissions were occupying in half of a building that we really needed to put beds in. So we are now currently located there. We have the 51 bed, which is the main treatment campus, and then we have 331 low intensity homes. So basically we have 29 low intensity, which makes us having 80 residential beds. So we also have 2 transitional homes in Salisbury and 2 in Georgetown, Delaware. Now, there's an update to that one. The one transitional home has been converted as of today, its first day, as a crisis home, which we are working with the counties to have 24/7 open access to treatment. So we'll go to the next page. So a couple years ago, obviously in 2016, Mayor Day formed the START Task Force. I'm referencing that because that really started to get a lot of people thinking and changing and us working together as a group. We identified certain needs in the area, the crisis intervention teams that we needed, and lack of crisis detox beds, which we address, lack of support treatment for adolescents, which PRMC to date is working on, lack of qualified certified addiction treatment professionals, and first responders carrying Narcan. Next page, Kevin. So here's what we have done to address the needs that were addressed in the START Task Force recommendations. So the first, crisis intervention teams. We work with the COAT team in Worcester County, and the lack of support treatment for adolescents, I had talked about that. First responders are carrying Narcan. Lack of crisis detox beds. We added 9 beds when we moved into the old Red Cross building. And the certified addiction treatment professionals, Warwick community, has worked hard on changing their program, and they're working on online access as well. So then, just like I talked about, admissions and administration building we've moved into. We started working in open access, where we used to have scheduled times for people to come in for treatment. We realized that that wasn't working too well. People wouldn't show. It wasn't when they were really looking for treatment. So we started a 1 day a week. It worked really well. And we talked about the main treatment campus. We added several levels of care. I won't go into all those different levels, but the outcome was that we could keep people up to 35 days on campus being paid. So we also purchased an 8-bed halfway housewarming for women in Salisbury. More currently, we offer open access 5 days a week. As of the crisis bed house opening today, we have 7 days a week of open access treatment. We added 2 additional halfway houses, which we spoke of. We have dedicated case managers not only on campus, but in every house and recovery house that we own. The case managers work with the individuals on looking for jobs, working on any barriers, court issues, legal issues, financial issues. We have a full-time nurse practitioner that we hired who works both on campus. She does sick calls, and she also works in our treatment houses and will work and be dedicated to the new crisis house that opened today. We partnered with the Maryland Coalition of Families to provide support education to anyone in the community with a loved one struggling with addiction. And we partnered with Worcester and Wycomico for Safe Station Bed. A safe station is where the county identifies a safe station. For Wycomico, it is the Recovery Resource Center, and it is a fire department in Worcester County. Anyone can go to there and say they're in crisis and they need treatment. The peers of that county then give us a call and we provide them access to treatment. So again, we're accredited by the Joint Commission, licensed obviously by the state of Maryland, and all of our houses are not only accredited by the Joint Commission, but they are certified by the National Association of Recovery Residences. So campus revitalization. So as Michael said, it was pretty clear that the buildings that we currently are in are not enough. They weren't designed to hold as many people as we would like to hold. The spaces and the areas, as I'll show you, are just too small. So when we met with Becker Morgan, go ahead, Kev. We took an aerial of the existing site. Obviously, if you see on the top right hand of the program, that is the current Emerson building. And then the second right in the middle is Hudson House. So you see how we're tucked away in there. And then here's Deer's Head Hospital on the bottom left. Next page, please. All right, so when we were talking about the acquisition, we decided to have Becker Morgan do a wetland survey, make sure that the property would be worth building, and everything turned out well. There were no wetlands identified besides obviously Johnson Lake. Next page. So Parker and Associates, when we first started talking about the acquisition, actually did a survey for us that split the property, which is Deer's Head property, exactly in half. And you can see that Deer's Head campus is the one on the bottom, and then the whole side of Emerson going to where we are now, except for the triangle, which is a PBS tower that is currently leased, would be what we would like to see acquired. Next. So these are the buildings. For those of you who haven't been on campus, these are the existing buildings. In mid-1990s, we had a $1 million renovation and added side sections to add more space. But that is what they look like. They were built in the 50s as housing for the nurses and doctors for Deer's Head campus. And here are some proposed master plans. As you can see, a big part of what we are doing is adding a large building in front and all of the parking in front of the campus to stop traffic and people from going on that campus. Right now, there is a lot of action going on that little, what we would call a parking lot and a driveway. What this would do is it would stop everyone. Everybody would park in that front section, and the walkway, the area around, which is now a driveway, would end up being more of a walkway. So there's a couple different renditions of the building. So you can see there's a lot of parking in front. This building consists of moving our nurses station to the building. It also has a full-size kitchen. It has open access crisis beds, which we talked about today, that we're opening. It has 8 beds here and would allow for additional 12 beds on campus when we move a number of services. We would move our admissions back to this. As you can see on the left side, there's a security desk, and there's a lot of group space for ancillary groups, yoga, art therapy, all of the space that we need. can go on, Kev. And there's a renditioning of what it would look like and different views. So this is what we've come together to talk about, and when we met with Becker Morgan, basically, they walked through our campus. Part of the revitalization is also working on the existing buildings we have, making sure they're structurally sound, and doing some renovations on that to become current, so we could still continue to use those. Really, what we're asking for today is support from the city of Salisbury. We cannot really even cut down a tree on the campus right now without a long, lengthy process of approval through the state. And it's very hard to do business there. It's hard to work around the type of treatment we do there. And it's hard to have a plan for the future.
I have one question. I'm not sure you can answer it. How many beds does the camp do we need?
I think
A lot more.
a lot more.
This probably won't cover the total need.
No, it won't. But, yeah.
The,
So,
the demand is more than enough to be
for other
satisfied
projects.
by multiple providers.
He's right. So we are full. We are full all the time. Even with the addition, if we did 8 or 20 beds, we would be full. It is exactly what it is. I like our model. I like the way with the open access, it keeps them full. But yes, there is room for other projects. We work well with other groups. If we don't have any beds, we call referrals. We'll drop them off at other facilities, and that's how we're all working now, and it works well.
I'm familiar with your
I know.
facility, as you know. And you guys do great work. I'll ask my fellow council people if they would consider writing a support letter with us.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Mr. Mayor?
I've already submitted mine,
Okay.
so I can provide it to you,
I-
Mr. President, so we can align talking points.
Yeah, let's line up, and you've got our support for sure.
Absolutely.
We'll move it forward. We have consensus.
Thank you. In case there's any confusion, I do want to make clear, the state has never rejected our request. In fact,
No, I know.
really, it's just never been able to reach the point of being answered. So thank you for your time.
One other thought, we could add this to our legislative priorities for this fiscal year, or excuse me, for this legislative session as well. We could make it one of the city's priorities.
Yeah,
Okay.
you got our support.
Yeah, I'm there.
Thank you
We'll be
so
fine.
much. I
We'll add
really
it.
appreciate it. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Pollock, you're back up.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite Chris Gilkerson to come up as well, in case there's any questions for him. Okay.
Evening, Chris.
So we are here to talk about a capacity fee waiver for a project at 218 West Main Street. And Chris submitted a request on behalf of Opportunity Street LLC. And I'll give just a brief overview for our newest council member. We have a bank of equivalent dwelling units, or EDUs, for capacity fees that the council established back on September 23rd, 2013. And it was 300 EDUs, and it was from the Linens of the Week property. So when we bought that property and took it out of service, it was using approximately 300 EDUs. So we have this bank for development and redevelopment in the enterprise zone, central business district, downtown development. So we keep a running log of how many EDUs we've allocated. They do actually expire, so I do track expiration dates. We haven't had any expire, but we keep an eye on that because it could go back into the bank. But, so that's the quick background, is I always want to make it clear to people, this is not money that the city's handing
Right.
out. This was money
Right.
that we had allocated. So this request is for a mixed-use apartment complex. This is the old Vernon Powell building. So there's 20 apartments and also the Children's Museum. So their request is for 22 EDUs. Currently, we
That
have...
leaves us with 86.
Yes, exactly. If we approve this, it would leave us with 86. We've allocated out almost 192 EDUs so far. We have 108 remaining, so this would leave us with 86. The value of this, just so you know what this does as an impact to their development, our current capacity fee rate is $3,533 per EDU, so this waiver request is for $77,726, so it's significant to the development. So they have met all the eligibility criteria, so we do recommend proceeding with this capacity fee waiver.
Questions? This is great. We're getting close to the end, though.
We are.
We gotta look for,
As we've talked about before, though, I mean, I think the recommendation is going to be just to continue the program without the attachment to Linens of the Week. We don't have a capacity issue.
no.
So,
No.
incentivizing the right types
Right.
of development in the right locations versus, the sprawl development that we might
Right.
otherwise see. Whatever tools we have in our tool belt, we want to put to use. But yes, the program, nothing is certain, so developers don't slow down. We're not saying that anything that,
We might
that's a
also want
certainty.
to review the criteria.
Absolutely, we could
Sure.
even tighten it up and
Yeah.
be even more focused.
Yeah.
You're right.
So do we have consensus? Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
Thank you
Chris.
very much.
I'm just gonna hang out.
Just gonna hang? No problem. Actually, I think you're on the majority. You may go home
Next
after this, but
I'm
Come
gonna
up,
invite
Ann.
Ann Roan up for
Yeah.
this one. Okay, so Ann will give a quick overview to our zoning rewrite process. We presented this to Planning Commission in October, and I know you had asked for us to come back and present to City Council, so.
So, I'm not going to do the full presentation that
okay.
JMT presented at Planning Commission, but that was included in your packets.
Yep.
And it is online if anybody wants to go through that PowerPoint presentation. So let's talk about why we're doing rezoning. The current zoning, which is Chapter 17 of our code, was written in 1983. It's long overdue for a rewrite. It's awfully cumbersome. We have 24 different zones with 21 different overlay districts. That's in comparison with local or nearby jurisdictions like Cambridge, which only has 14 zones. And while its population isn't the same, landmass is very similar. So I think it's a fair comparison. We have 236 sections in the code, and that's just individual sections with not counting all the different subsections. And all of those sections have cross-references. So when we're reviewing plans for development, and while developers are trying to meet the code, it's cumbersome, to say the least. And it's, we're looking to add tools that help us achieve what we think the city's vision is and to achieve a higher quality of development. So we see this rewrite as a three-phase process, and we're in the first phase. We have a consultant on board. We were able to get funding in this year's budget. We went through our urban design IDIQ consultants and hired what we think is a really good team, JMT, which is out of Hunt Valley, Maryland. They have had a lot of experience in Salisbury, so there's an understanding from the get-go of what they're dealing with. And what we really want to accomplish in this is not only to make it absolutely more user-friendly, but up to date with the latest and greatest planning procedures and policies. We want it to be a lot more illustrative And we want to consolidate some of these zones and some of the sections and make it, easier to get through. We also want to, it's a tall order, but we want to incorporate into the zones all the other master plans, like the bike master plan, the city park plan, the Route 13, all of these other ones, including the historic district guidelines and our critical area commission program, or critical area program, which are also concurrently doing a rewrite. This is in keeping with the administration and the city's goal to have a one-stop shop. We want to have a one-stop document. And so the first phase, which we're in right now, is assessing, is an assessment phase. And so the consultant is going through and reviewing all the existing documents, trying to see what, within the existing zoning ordinance, things that can be retained, things that need to be dramatically changed. They've created a spreadsheet that we're going to help populate that really compares all the different zoning, which is like a gazillion feet long. And the next phase will be actually looking at the zoning map and seeing where we can consolidate zones and start looking at rezoning and the mapping part of that project. And finally, the third is the real meat, and that is the actual rewrite of the document, combining all of the two phases. So we're excited about the project. We're excited about the consultant's work. We expect it to be a very transparent process. We expect there will be lots of public input meetings. We're hoping that the council will help us with creating a stakeholders group that will help guide the project. And we have recommended placeholders in that stakeholder group, the core group, as well as an ad-needed group. And so here we are. Oh, and the timeline, we're thinking.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Gantt chart. It
Yes.
says May
May of
for
2020.
phase one in 2020.
Yeah. Well, they're
Just
working,
phase one.
they're working.
Phase one.
Yeah, so we're looking at probably, given my past experience, and I've had a lot of it in this area, and it doesn't really matter how small the community is or really how big it is. Well, it does matter how big it is, but I think we're looking at 2.5 to 3 years from start
Okay.
to finish.
But even phase one is pretty aggressive.
It is very
Right.
aggressive. And in the meantime, we're hoping that the council will consider including this as a line item in the budget next year, but we're also pursuing other opportunities for funding through grants.
So I guess the idea here, and maybe the perspective when we're coming into it, and we discussed this when we did the city reorganization, is starting with the greenfield.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a greenfield, what would you do?
I have answers.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah,
But
this is also, this is where I think, and Ann and Amanda both alluded to this, but I mean, this is where you start to think about, what do we want? We've started to articulate that in some of the plans that Ann mentioned, like, the Route 13 corridor study that says, here's the type of buildings we want. Our code doesn't do anything to either incentivize or require those same things. So we've adopted plans that say, yeah, that's what we want to do, but our code doesn't say that. I'm not even sure it'd be legal. I don't
We'll be
know.
exploring all of that. as we
Right,
go
right,
through
but that's what this process is for.
And that's what
and
the
so
process is
the
for.
thought process is you're not developing a code for today. We're developing a code for 40 years down the road.
And if you look at,
That's what we hope. We hope,
That's the
yeah.
goal.
if you look at the best examples on like form-based code websites, and if you look at the really best examples out there, it's a little uncomfortable for some people, the product, because the product is very different from what we're used to. And one of the big departures is that it worries less about what's going on behind the walls I mean, it very much does I mean, it doesn't change or
land
alleviate
use.
your building code or any of that. None of that goes away, your housing requirements. But what does change is from a zoning allowance, worries a lot less about what's going on the inside and more about externalities. You know, what's the impact on a neighborhood, and parking and, you know, traffic, and, you know, those are the things that ultimately we'll want to be measuring, and not being so heavy-handed in terms of government saying this is what may and may not happen, you know, behind your walls, which in theory addresses a lot of problems that larger cities are starting to address right now, which are like, you know, granny flats and you know, there's additional housing units and also entrepreneurship, you know, starting businesses in the home, things that are largely outlawed right now. They're happening anyway, but they're largely outlawed by our antiquated 1983 zoning code.
And we want our zoning ordinance to support other things, like the flood nuisance ordinance. I mean, we want, so we see this as an opportunity to be a lot less prescriptive regarding setbacks and height restrictions, and much more based on what the surrounding built environment is. And of course, you can't not look at land use. I mean, you have to look at what's allowed, and that's part of the process. But as far as what's allowed where, that's going to be explored and dealt with. But regarding especially new development, and it's going to be a lot less about how it looks based on some prescriptive, archaic set, you know, rules and regulations. So I think it's exciting. I think Salisbury is in a great position to take on a project like this. Typically, I will say, you do your comprehensive plan, and that's your map, and your zoning ordinance is your vehicle to navigate that. Our comp plan is up for not a rewrite, but a revisit in 2020. It's in pretty good shape. I don't anticipate a lot of major changes. We have been told by Maryland Department of Planning that they are advising municipalities whose renewal or rewrite or revisit or update anywhere from 1920 to 21 to hold off until 21 because of the 2020 census. So I think we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's regarding those types of regulations. And they'll be partners with us along the way. So it's a good time.
Yeah.
It's an exciting project.
It's aggressive.
Yes,
I'll
yes,
say
it
that.
is.
I'll say that.
That's not the first time Salisbury's.
No. Well, I think, you know, when the codes were written, designated growth areas didn't exist.
No, they didn't.
You know, that's just one of the things, but,
Well, I think it's been a series of text amendments, and really in a perfect world, we wouldn't do those anymore. We'd put a moratorium on that, but we can't,
Right.
because basically those are Band-Aids, and they're not real
yeah, we're
solutions.
maneuvering through the process. As
Exactly.
opposed to
Right.
having a proper process.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.
welcome.
Thank you. One last one. Okay, so this last item for me is a budget amendment for a developer contribution for pedestrian improvements. The Coventry Plaza Shopping Center is under design. This is part of the Adelaide Farms development. It's across the street from Hunter's Crest, and Mr. Boda had asked a question recently about pedestrians crossing Beagland Park Drive there. Beagland Park is wide. People drive fast there, and it's very difficult from pedestrians from those single-family houses to get across to the shopping center, and especially now that we'll be adding more commercial businesses there. So we were able to take that comment and add it to our staff report for Planning Commission. So we added a requirement for that development to pay for pedestrian improvements at that intersection. So that was agreed upon at Planning Commission in July. The Department of Infrastructure and Development has performed a preliminary design and has done a cost estimate and determined that the cost for a signalized pedestrian improvements there would be $27,200. So this will have the push button signals, and it's both across Beagland Park Drive and Still Meadow Boulevard. So you could get across, either leg of the intersection with pedestrian signals. So this includes curb gutter, sidewalk, everything that we need, the activators, and modifications to our signal boxes. So the developer is recommending that he would pay us to do these improvements. It is our cabinets. We do have existing infrastructure there. And so this is the budget amendment to accept his contribution. Would like to do this first and then make the improvements.
The signal audible?
Yes, so they have to have the audible, yep, exactly.
Now,
Yes.
is that audible going to be on major intersections? Is that going to be standard now, or do we?
I would need to check. I believe that's standard now when we're putting it, well, I'll double check on that and get back to you.
We should
to see if it's-
consider something, maybe a limitation type thing, but we should really think about that.
Yeah, I think they may be standard, but I'll
Okay.
check and see if it's a requirement.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I did note that there's the countdown timer, so yeah, it would be audible as well as the
Okay.
timers.
Anybody have trouble accepting the,
No, and I will let
Not
the
a
residents know that contacted me about this, that
Great.
moving forward. with
Good.
this, so.
Good,
okay,
Thank you.
good, great, thank you very much.
fantastic. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too.
Yeah, if you want to send something back for dinner. Okay. Next up, chiefs and friends.
All right. Now it's
Give
the
the whole-
Chief Tall Show.
We have the whole crew.
That's how we roll. You gotta take us all on.
Dude,
How are
How you
you?
doing?
How are you, sir?
wear glasses.
Sir?
Glasses? Close work, I know.
Close work, boss.
Hi Lee, how are you? Good. You can share the mic. No problem. Okay,
Good evening.
good evening.
First of all, let me say congratulations on your re-elections and your election.
Thank you,
And
Chief.
we certainly look forward to another 4 years of working with all of you, so thank you. The first item that we have to discuss is a ordinance for a budget amendment for our city's capital project fund to reallocate funds for our roof replacement at Station 1. When the original work was done and the contract was signed, we had a contingency plan in there for some roof repair due to deteriorated decking boards and all underneath the roof. After they ripped it all off, it was a little bit more damage to the roof than what was anticipated. So we are asking for this budget amendment to move funds from existing or same bond pool. It'll be from the phone system fire department for our phone system upgrade of $1,431 to the roof replacement project.
That's it.
That's the first one. We started easy.
It gets worse.
You just build up to the crescendo.
Builds up.
I just
So
want
you
you
know what
to,
happens when you say budget amendment to me?
I know, the hair, but I, hey,
Back in the day.
but I want you to remember the great news you just received from the audit.
That's correct.
I knew you were gonna bring that up.
That was excellent news that I just want us to remember. Roof
Okay.
replacement.
We owe,
When we start a tally,
no, I already know what the total is, so
Get your calculator out.
it's up here. Do you have any problem with
No,
that,
I'm
with that piece of it? Okay, good.
One down. That was the easy one.
You're gonna jump right to the biggie now?
No. Gradual. The next thing on the, do you need to ask me or do I just move forward?
No, go right ahead.
Okay.
You're on a roll. You're 1 for 1.
There you go. The next thing that's in front of you is an ordinance requesting an amendment of the FY20 general fund to appropriate an additional position allocation for the hiring of a volunteer recruitment coordinator for our department. As you're aware, the volunteer firefighting has been a long-standing tradition in the American Fire Service and within the city of Salisbury. The need for an active volunteer membership is crucial to the overall success of a combination fire department. Unfortunately, over the years, we have locally seen a decline and nationally in volunteerism in the fire service. We could contribute that to a number of obstacles from being time restraints, single families, increasing call volumes. The training requirements alone deter people from wanting to volunteer. Some of the information that I presented shows an alarming rate of people leaving our organization. And what's even more alarming of them leaving the organization is how long, when we get them in, do they stay. And our records show that people are leaving 67% of the time within 2 years of coming into the organization. 67% of those people leave within 2 years. And when we ask why, what's happening, they talk about being lost. They don't know where to go. They don't really get direction from people and a lot of other issues that our department faces. So through the work, I forgot to introduce some people. So to my left, Deputy Chief Lee Smith, he's in charge of our volunteer services. Deputy Chief James Gladwell. Two gentlemen to his right, President Rick Rathel of Station 2 Corporation and President Billy Lewis of the 16 Volunteer Corporation. So through the
Whose
work,
twin brother also works for the city. Right?
So through the work of the volunteer corporation and the fire department's admin, we are proposing the development of a full-time volunteer coordinator position. This position will be essential to the continued success of our volunteer component and will assist in developing, leading, and implementing a comprehensive program designed to attract and retain qualified volunteers for the department. This will be accomplished through creating a recruitment and retention strategic plan that builds a consistent image for volunteering that is positive, engaging, and supports recruitment, identifying potential sources of volunteers and implementing strategies to reach all communities, developing an onboarding process that is inclusive and aimed at improving our diversity, providing oversight of the volunteer contingent on a daily basis with the emphasis placed on our new members to ensure that they do not get lost. Monitoring volunteer participation by analyzing performance metrics, and providing marketing ideas and activities aimed at targeted audiences that will raise the awareness about the fire department and attract non-traditional qualified members. We understand the financial commitment, and the volunteer corporations are strongly committed to this creation and implementation of this position. And because of that, they're looking to partner with the city and build on a long-standing cooperative team effort that already exists. So the proposed plan for this position would be year one, the volunteer component would pay 100% of the salary and benefits of the position. Get it up and running, move forward with it. Year two, it would start 75-25, year three a 50-50, where we will stop and analyze the success of the program. If it's successful and it's working, we see an impact, an improvement in our volunteer retention, we would ask that the numbers start to switch where the volunteer corporation would pay 25% and the city would pay 75% in year four, and then year five and moving on, it would be 100% funded by the city in perpetuity. This position has already been reviewed by Human Resources, and they've established the recommended pay grade and rate for the position.
Couple of questions and comments, really. You mentioned in there, which I think is a good thing and should be mentioned, that you're going to revisit each year to see the goals that were established and what the payback is on each of these things. I will also tell you that the fire department isn't alone in losing volunteers. Every fraternal organization that I know of is struggling with the same thing. And it was curious when you mentioned the percentage of people that last only 2.5 years, because the investment in those people is significant.
Yes, it is.
Having been there, it's significant. And I think one of the biggest focuses is going to have to be retention, because you don't want to pay the upfront costs and have the guy leaving or the gal leaving. So that's going to be an interesting focus. This guy's going to, or the guy or gal is going to have a heck of a job.
They are.
I mean, This is not an easy job.
And that's why we looked at year 3 to look at success, because it's gonna take an amount of
I would
time
agree with that.
to get the process in place, to start measuring, to improve our metrics of success, develop, especially when people leave the organization, exit interviews, and how we can, like you said, retain these people once they get them in the door.
Yeah.
What's the amount of time per week that a volunteer, like a fully engaged volunteer, what's the amount of time per week that they're committing to volunteer?
It's gonna depend.
Depends.
You have some that will put in, 24 to 48 hours a week outside of either going to school or working a full-time job, family commitments. And then you have some that will do the minimum to stay in active membership. The requirements is, it's 36 hours a month is what a volunteer has to do within our city, so,
After schooling,
what's that?
after schooling, after they're fully
Yeah, that
qualified.
doesn't count all
Yeah,
the
it
training
doesn't
they
count.
do.
Right.
Yeah.
Training is,
So you have 36 sessions of just fire training. And now with EMT, they're getting ready to go over 200 hours of classroom sessions. So now you're 6 to 8 months just completing an EMT program. Then you add a hazmat program on top of that. So a year and a half, they're just in classes getting
Yeah.
the requirements,
The basics.
the basics,
Just the
exactly.
basics.
yeah.
So,
And then you
Chief-
got driver, then it goes on and on. Engineers,
Anything that you want
drivers.
advanced beyond that. Those three things that the chief mentioned are just, they're the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. President, if
Yes.
I may, can I ask a question? We're talking a bit about the cost to the city and thus the value to the citizens on the basis of the investment that we make. But there's also the value to the city on the basis of the cost offset. And
Oh,
I
absolutely.
know previously we have quantified that figure. I mean, the tremendous value that volunteers provide to the city in not having to fully staff, a fully paid complement to replace the hours that those volunteers are providing the city. Do we have a figure,
I don't
an
have an
estimate of
updated
what
one.
that is updated? No.
I can get you one.
Okay. I think that'd be valuable. I mean, it's in the millions.
Yes.
Millions of dollars per
Absolutely.
year
Absolutely.
provided.
Yeah, I think the last time it was done, it was 7.3 million.
So
Yeah.
just put that in context
just for
of what
our
this
department.
recruiting effort and retention effort might offer the city.
Right.
Yeah, it's, yeah. Well, I'm a firm believer in volunteers, obviously. And I think this is the right thing to do. And I think that the establishment of the position and the fact that we're going to review it and the fact that you guys are stepping up and covering the cost in the beginning is a good start. You have support?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And can I just also add, it's a tremendous show of good faith from the volunteer corporations
Absolutely.
that they believe will keep our word and carry through, in the years to come.
We're committed to it. I mean, certainly, we've had our ups and downs. 10 of the SAFER grant employees that were hired were volunteers,
Yep.
which is good.
Yep.
But that also brings our volunteer population down. And we're working on getting that back. We've tried to customize our personnel board where it's a joint board now that everybody interviews instead of one station doing one thing, one station doing another thing. We've combined those efforts and, we're bringing them on, but the idea of it is now is to keep those people, that we're bringing in, make sure that they're sticking around more than 2.5 years.
Wish I was 40 years younger.
We wish you were too.
Age is just a number. I can give you an application if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, I was listening to the radio and I think it was DC was talking about how they're targeting retirees because they have all this life experience and likely training from.
Yeah, we don't have any breath left. That's our problem.
Yeah,
Sure
but look
you
at
do.
what your experience could provide to
Yeah.
the
There's
leadership.
a proud history of council presidents having served as volunteer firefighters, Norm Conway. And
Yeah.
Others, I'm sure.
Yep.
Jack Heath.
I miss it. But you've got your position, so we'll bring it up on the next meeting.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you.
Just watch now.
Are you sitting down?
I'm 121. Does that number ring a bell? No.
This one's gonna hurt.
Speaking of breathing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, the next item is an ordinance requesting a budget amendment of the FY '20 general fund budget to appropriate funds for the purchase of self-contained breathing apparatus. As you recall, during the FY '20 capital improvement plan and budget process, the department submitted a request to replace our existing 90 sets of self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA, which includes almost 220 face pieces. This request was made because the fire department's current SCBA has reached its end of serviceable life in accordance with the NFPA, or National Fire Protection Association's standard 1981 on open circuit self-contained breathing apparatus, and OSHA's 42 CFR 84 respiratory protection devices. In an attempt to save the city these funds, the department attempted to secure funding through the Assistance to Firefighter Grant Program to cover the cost, with the exception of the matching funds. Regrettably, we have received the official notification that our application was not selected to receive any funds from that grant. The AFG grant is the FEMA's most competitive grant programs, and in fact, this year they received 8,439 applications requesting more than $1.8 billion in federal assistance. So this budget amendment is to secure the 90 sets of SCBA and the additional face masks at a replacement cost of $740,000. And the
Don't all talk at once.
The pin job.
Remember what I said,
Budget information.
the earlier news we received.
Which now is going to be back to where it was.
No,
Not quite.
Look, I printed it out. I can hand this out to you, Mr. Bradley. I figured I shouldn't do that. Actually, Julia advised me not to do that.
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Look, you know,
She
can I
knows
just-
because she would get the,
That's
The
exactly what I
dad
said.
look,
I said
dad
you
look.
get the dad look.
yeah. Can I just advise that, you know, we mapped out where we'd be, you know, if we took a couple of different roads on this. I mean, bottom line is we have to buy the SCBA. We don't have an option. Once it's expired, it can't be used, and then our firefighters can't fight fires.
when does it expire?
April.
April.
Yep. It's good for 15 years.
We're buying them this year. The question is how. We could take on debt. That was the alternative that we had originally contemplated in the budget. So we had originally contemplated two scenarios in the budget process, and what we ultimately sent to council was anticipating the grant. You know, that's nice, and obviously we had hoped that it happened. It didn't come. They gave us the safer grant, and we're appreciative for that. But if we were to take on the debt, Keith's calculations show we're taking on, you know, another 50% in debt payments and interest payments that is totally unnecessary when we're in the strong financial position we're in. So taking the 700,000 out of, or the 680 after the 70 that we've got, you know, budgeted, whatever it is, but taking it out, we still end up, you know, $1.8 million this year to the good over last year. Or excuse me, 1.8 million additional, you know, dollars unassigned surplus over last year. So we're in a good position to do it.
I know we are.
It just hurts.
Here's my, I'm putting my other hat on. You've got you said yourself, you got an extremely competitive process,
Yes.
to the tune of $740,000. Should we not have put in half of what we, to cover our butts in the budget?
Typically, we don't, but, I mean, we contemplated two scenarios. A halfway coverage, I can't speak for Keith, but he would advise against that. I mean,
Well, I would advise the whole thing, and then you get a bonus.
and we talked about that. We talked about doing that. Now, we were going to do it through having it in our bond. So it was a debt payment. It wasn't, we didn't contemplate a scenario where we assigned cash to this.
But if you put it in the bond, you don't have to take it.
That's right. It could have gone to other things.
Right.
It would still get rolled into the issuance costs and things like
Right.
that. There'd be some modest loss. So, and we considered both. And I don't remember if we did it at the council level or if we did it at the mayor's level, but we considered both scenarios.
I don't recall discussing it. I recall it being in there as a grant.
Yeah, yeah, and the grant, you know, we were fairly confident. Oh, Jack.
No,
Jack. Microphone.
Sorry. You want to hear me? Okay. First of all, let me say, it's a safety item, okay? I would never hold it up. I'm just questioning the process, okay? Like I would for any other thing. And it's just, this is a big hit. You've got my vote for it, so I'll go ahead and say that on the record. But it's me and budget amendments. You'll pick up on that if you haven't picked up on it.
If I may,
I'm
just
starting to
in
get
defense
you.
of the process, it's bad news. You know, nobody wants to have to pay for something that, you know, somebody else might have been able to pay for. Yeah, but at the same time, there are really only two scenarios. We pay for it or we get a grant for it. We
Right.
anticipated being successful in the grant process,
Right.
and more people applied than they had funding for. So I don't know how much, you know, we can unpack that.
No, I don't.
You know what I mean?
Leave it where it is. I've said my piece, and we can't change it. And we certainly can't do without the SCBA, so.
Yeah, I would just say, you know, if we've got large ticket items like this going forward, that at least bring it up in our budget discussions, so at least we're aware that, you know, because I would have remembered.
Maybe there's a degree of risk thing.
Well,
Yeah. That you say, hey, we are going to
That's
go
all.
for a grant.
it's just hard to.
Hindsight
Yeah,
is 20/20.
yeah,
Let's
yeah.
face
It's
it.
hard to anticipate, you know, the degree of likelihood that we would succeed versus, I mean, when you look at, we've never anticipated getting a grant for SAFER, for example, in a budget, and then just hoped beyond hope, right?
Yeah.
We've always gone the other way.
Yep.
When it comes to capital funding and grants, we don't anticipate them at all. In other cases, we anticipate a grant and we just simply don't buy the thing if we don't get it. Like with when it comes to things at the zoo, or we just simply don't spend the money. Don't get the grant, you don't get to spend the money. This is just a little different.
Yeah, well, the other thing.
In which case,
the other-
maybe I'm proving your point for you.
Well,
that
the other thing.
maybe we should.
Well, no, serious. The other thing you could do is you could say, on a must-have, let's all agree. You can't ignore this.
Right.
So put it in the budget and find other ways to spend less on the other side. And I'm not saying find $740,000 in your budget. Okay, we're gonna take a budget increase because this is when it comes due, et cetera. But it's just a number that any CEO would look at that and go, So.
Now,
And
is
this
this
one-
all,
this
the-
one
is
did
this
too.
all the units
No.
that we have, or is this just,
Yes.
they're not
This is
broken
every
up?
one of them.
It's every one of them.
Everything.
Everything we need
It's
all in.
every SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus,
Oh,
bottles,
wait a minute now.
spare bottles,
Yeah.
face pieces, everything has to be replaced.
So it's not on a, like, this is like a third of
No.
our inventory, this
This
is
is
So there's no
100%
rotation.
every 15
Not on this
years.
item. And-
Okay.
And there's,
It's rotated every 15 years.
Is there any way we could get it to a point where we could rotate it?
Then you have different standards, that
Yeah.
it's
So
new
you're up to
packs,
new, but they'll,
which becomes problematic because things change. So one day I'm wearing a pack that's in an older standard. The next time I'm wearing one in a new standards. Features are gonna change, technology is gonna change.
okay. All right, we have consensus? Okay. Told you. You're right. All right, you got another one.
One last one. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna avoid the word budget amendment. I'm just gonna say,
Too
our
late.
vehicle account is in need. So,
Okay,
what you have is a budget amendment for the FY 2020 general fund to appropriate funds for our vehicle repair account. Over the past 5 months, not even, we have experienced a substantial amount of unanticipated repair costs to our apparatus.
apparatus or ambulance?
Both apparatus, all of
The new ambulances?
it. No,
No.
Oh,
our aged
The old.
fleets.
okay.
So, as our fleet continued to age, we've experienced a substantial amount of repairs. We have spent over 95% of our allocated budget in our vehicle account of $125,540. On these items, truck two alone, we have spent almost $32,000 in repairs from EGR valves and coolers for the emissions of it. New fuel injectors, new manifold exhaust, turbo, a lot of other things.
Brakes.
Brakes. Truck one, 18,762. EGR valve, EGR cooler, both 09s, remember that. Engine one, an 09, EGR cooler, EGR valve of $6,186. An ambulance of $6,600, another ambulance of $11,000 where we almost had to rebuild the motor in the ambulance. Brush unit that we had to basically replace everything underneath of it, from the brakes, rotors, pads, seals, lines, tie rods. One of the things we have to think about when we look at our equipment, and we haven't probably done a very good job of measuring our hours versus our mileage. We always look at the mileage on a vehicle. So let's just take truck two for example. It's an 09. The mileage on the vehicle is 56,585. The hours is 5,887. To do a conversion of that, you multiply the hours, some will say by 50, some will say by 60. So that vehicle, that engine, if we were to look at the mileage on it, it's at 294,000 to 353,000
Yeah, it's the hours.
miles that are on these units.
So the total on that is what?
The budget amendment of $75,000. We went back and looked at prior years of the adopted budget and then what transfers were made into just that account over those last 5 years. The average budget number is $168,000 roughly of what we have spent. Now, it's been up and down over those years. And this year we started at $125,540.
Okay. $815,000.
I told you it was gonna hurt.
Okay. Mr. Boda?
Have we looked at, are we starting to look at and anticipating in the future a replacement on our vehicles?
We have I would say a very good, I used to think it was very good, fleet replacement schedule, where we have ambulances on a rolling debt every 5 years, so they're 5-year front line, 5-year back line, so every 5 year, 3 ambulances. Our engine replacement has been set at 10 years, and our ladder trucks, this is the first time we've had quints, and we established it at 14 years, which we think that has to be bumped up because the quints are running almost like engines.
Yeah.
So,
That's because of the EMS and
yes, it's everything.
medical assists and.
And they're all 09s.
Yeah.
The ECGRs, all manufactured by the same people?
Cummings.
Okay.
So we'll probably be
Why don't
looking
we
at something
sue 'em?
other than Cummins.
Why don't we sue them? Can we sue them? Mark?
Probably not.
You want to sue?
We want to sue Cummings.
You want us-
We want to sue, we want you to sue Cummings. I'm sort of serious. They all went, they're all 09.
Whatever you want, Mr. President.
The same,
Yeah, the two engines or the 2 trucks and the engine are 09s.
okay.
Um,
Let's, you want to try to oversell or assist?
No, I mean, there's
Okay.
not, there's
Nothing
not
we can
much
do.
to say. I mean,
No.
we try to never bring these relatively small budget amendments to you. We try to handle it with budget transfers internally. But, 25% of their budget got taken up with one issue with one vehicle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's out of the norm. I wouldn't anticipate next year's, and this is for the benefit of everybody at the table, I wouldn't anticipate next year's vehicle maintenance account increasing by 75,000. However,
Speak for yourself.
however, I do think it's got to increase. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
things that we're seeing,
Yeah,
are
but I
going
think those
to
are the kinds
recur.
of things, if I see a graph
Yeah,
with the thing,
some things, and what this is why we break down the actual when we're anticipating a budget increase in a certain line, and we look at the actual versus the budgeted, because I'll bet we've got a trajectory of having transferred money in the past few years, and it's it has increased, but not enough, clearly. And we are replacing ambulances
Yes.
this coming year, so we've got that to look forward to.
Well, and even if you look at the years where we've done the transfers, I mean, the year that we budgeted $100,000, we had to transfer almost another $100,000.
Exactly.
And there's not a year, the lowest year that we spent
18.
was $156,000.
And that was an 18.
yeah.
So
And
in addition to that,
Yeah.
I would just say that, big picture, again, recognizing that that's not where we want to be at any point in time. After all is said and done, we'll still have the best reserve position we've ever had right now.
And then Chief, next, this coming year, when
I've got to
when the
see the
mayor sends
ratio
the notes
between
back to
expense
cut the
and
budget,
where they
don't
are.
cut it from this one again, all right?
But you're right.
You'll like it. You'll like it.
I normally
I did.
don't. It's above me that will,
Oh, so you, that was good.
What did I just miss? I just felt,
That was
I
a
just
lob
felt some
shot.
heat over here. What did I just miss?
You just got the lob over to you.
they
so
said, when
the ball's in your
when the
court.
administration comes back and asks me to reduce parts of my budget, don't pick that account. I said, I don't.
Okay.
All right, we have consensus. Okay,
Get the wheels rolling.
have a nice dinner.
I would say have a nice night.
Thank you.
We've got to take a, Keith, we're going to have to take a 5-minute bio,
End on.
okay? We're going to take 5 minutes. You guys.
You brought it up.
All right, we're back. I think I'm okay. Next up, we are going to have a discussion on the Salisbury Board of License Commissioners. Where are we?
Okay. Yeah, this is basically just a draft of the law with a corrected name, so we're no longer confusing them with the county board. It just sets up the framework for the code should the state approve going forward.
Okay, and do we need to send a letter,
Or,
joint letter?
or resolution.
Or what should we do to sort of egg them on?
We're meeting with them next week.
Yeah, we meet with the Eastern Shore delegation on the 10th,
Poplar Hill, yeah.
Next Tuesday.
right? Or is that the 10th?
Next
or
Tuesday,
yeah, 10th. So, you
We'll
know,
just put on the agenda.
it is the number one item on the agenda.
Perfect.
You know, I think we have the support of the delegation, or at least the members who
We need,
we need in order to carry it forward.
okay.
You know, I
And-
think there are details that we need to continue to work out, but we've got time, you know. That
Yeah.
doesn't really need to be worked out till January, well, late this month.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
And in this language, obviously, there's details that would need to be worked out, you know, with.
But the
whatever
model we
pop-
used was the
This is the
Annapolis model?
for Annapolis, yeah.
Okay, so okay.
We might want to add a folk festival section or something to the code. I don't know.
Well, wasn't there? I thought I had saw something. I mean, really, there's something in there about events, right?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, there
I
is.
mean,
There's
that-
an
But
event
the only
section.
thing that's kind of ambiguous, I'm sorry, is they have nothing under the heading wine festivals. They have the heading, but they don't give any of the details of what's required. I'm guessing at the time it was passed, Annapolis hadn't really decided what to do with
Yeah.
those yet. But my, you
A
know,
fest-
that,
You could just leave it a festival, couldn't you?
yeah, I think that would be the
Just
better course.
festival.
Festivals.
And that covers all festivals,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
And then set up a system that is beneficial to Salisbury
Right.
for how that's done.
Okay. We are now at that point where I will read the public notice about the closed session. Closed session to follow the work session. The Salisbury City Council will convene in the regularly scheduled work session in the council chambers in the Government Office Building, December the 2nd, 2019 at 4:30 PM. Immediately upon the adjournment of the work session, approximately 7:25, which it's not, but we're a little ahead, council will entertain a vote to convene in closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice on a legal matter in accordance with the annotated code of Maryland 3-305B7. And we will reconvene after the closed session. I will entertain a motion now to enter into closed session.
So moved.
Mr. Boda, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Gregory? Everyone in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. The vote is 3-0 with 2 absent. We are now in closed session. No. That's like when okay. Well, we're out of closed session. We had a discussion about our participation in a class action suit. If there's nothing else on the agenda and no comments, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.